Good morning. My name is Margie O'Driscoll, and I am the director of the Center for Innovation in San Francisco. We are a global organization led by an amazing board of directors, and today we are going to hear the final presentations from one of our favorite and most enduring programs. We have courageous leaders from the design and construction industry who have been working closely with two amazing professors, Professor Vivek Rao and Professor Rachel Dzombak, to go through an exercise looking at design thinking and systems thinking in the context of our work today. I'm not going to say anything further than we're so excited to have the participants sharing their process and outcomes of this work, because really this is their moment to share with you some amazing and outstanding work in the field. Rachel, would you like to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you so much, Margie, and welcome everyone. So excited to be here today to really celebrate what our participants, the journeys that they have been on over the past 6 months in our Innovation Lab. My name was Rachel Dzombak, and along with my colleague Vivek Rao, we have been really lucky to partner with the Center for Innovation for the past 4 years now to deliver this Innovation Lab. And our goal with the lab is pretty simple. We want to help participants frame and solve problems that they care about. The lab brings together at its core a couple of different areas: tool sets, mindsets, and skill sets associated with innovation. And in the lab, we practice all of those. We do a series of exercises that draw people in to see problems in new light, as well as to think about creative solutions for the challenges that they're working on. Ultimately, trying to cultivate creative leadership, which is needed in every industry today because of the number of complex problems that we are faced with. The problems we're facing today, there's no precedent for them. And so that's why we need these new mindsets, tool sets, and skill sets to figure out, how do we move forward? How do we get started on solving problems that matter? There's 3 core elements that are in our lab, and I mention this because it is a repeat offering. We will be offering the lab again in 2024. So if you're curious, please do reach out to learn more, get in touch with the Center for Innovation, because these 3 elements, I think, are what allow the participants to figure out how do they start to work on the problems that they care about. So one is being design innovation. The bread and butter of our program is all about what we see as the 4 main behaviors of design innovation: observe and notice, frame and reframe, imagine and design, and make and experiment. And I'm sure in the stories that you'll hear today, it'll touch on those different elements. We also think about systems thinking because any problem exists in a broader context. Figuring out how do you hold the tension, how do you think about these different systems elements, critically important for today. And all of that learning happens in a project that's relevant to our participants. Vivek and I are not what we would call sage on the stage instructors. We tend to be much more guide on the side, trying to help people provide just-in-time coaching. And we find that learning happens best when people are motivated by problems that they care about. And we call our program a lab, which labs also often evoke a scientific or school-based process where it's about practicing approaches and tools in a controlled environment. But we try to make sure that that lab, and we do that, but we do it in a fun, engaging, and experimental way. We believe very strongly that innovation is a learning process, that at any point in time, it's all about, what am I learning? How does that help me move forward? And the lab evokes what we hope is a spirit of experimentalism, that you can't just put everything in place and then cross your fingers, close your eyes, and say, I hope this solves my problem. Instead, the mindset and skills associated with experimentation are critical to the work that we do. And again, I think you'll hear a lot about experiments run by the participants through our stories today. So let me just say one word before we get to our first presenter on format. So each presenter is going to present a little bit about the journey that they went on over the past 6 months for their project, including maybe sharing some stories or lessons learned, key elements of the program that stuck out to them. We're aiming for presentations about 5 to 8 minutes long, and then we'll have room for questions afterwards. My colleague Vivek will be monitoring the chat. If you put questions into the chat, we can facilitate some Q&A after each presentation. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Erin to get us started. Welcome, Erin.
Yeah, my name's Aaron Anderson. I work with Swinnerton as the Director of Innovation, which sounds like I should know all the answers about how to change the organization. But I think one of the biggest challenges that that everyone has is where they're at in the organization and where the people that they're working with are at. And I think that's one of the really valuable parts of this is, influence comes from relationships. And what you can do with different people in different parts of the process has a lot to do with where they're at in the organization. And so, we're going to go through some of these things, but one of the sort of largest, and I call it a problem here, but puzzles, I guess, in our business is that we teach a lot of folks in our construction management programs, maybe not at some of the really great universities, but at most of the universities, that construction management is about doing what you're told. And so what happens is we have a lot of these, what I call red hat problems, which are, the same people that are responsible for the awards or the incentives for an outcome are the same ones that are entering the information. They're the same ones that are building those local systems. And so, we're very much part of a local system. As we were entering this, we did this in conjunction with some other business partners that were asking for some support. And so we had a captive audience, but they were also very much red hats in their process. And so that was a big challenge with what we did. So go ahead. So we started with a pretty defined question, which was, we're in the middle, we've got a traditional client with a design, and here it's coming to us as a GC. So we really wanted to be in the middle of this classic problem in our construction roles. We're asking, how do we improve this startup and the bid handover process in our construction? We do some, we have some opportunities in our business to integrate project design teams to do integration, but we get a lot of projects that just aren't like that. And so we're looking deeply at how do we solve the information revelation problem? How do we solve the incentive alignment problem in this traditional handoff process, ease the transition between the client and the contractor. So, when we first started off with this, we had some ideas about just what we thought, and our side, our project manager's side of the problems. And really, what we realized is that we lose multiple weeks at the beginning of these projects because of simple things like the certificate of insurance, making sure that all the information has been handed over, and making sure that we actually have the right drawings at the right time, and just that initial, trying to get that initial part of some short running projects clean. But we started with some of the exercises, and then we had a couple of opportunities, some access to the client side, and did some interviews. We also interviewed some of our internal people about how they've built checklists or how they've built systems to smooth the handoff process. But we right away realized that there weren't a lot of standards, and there weren't really a lot of processes set out. When we asked different people on the client side what their process was about, we got a lot of "let me get back to you" on that, and that at the same time we weren't getting the information. It revealed a lot about where the problem is and sort of where we can go to actually implement solutions, but where the challenges were at. A lot of what we found was we have a really hard time sharing information and getting information to everyone. And then we asked about some simple things like security, and it was because they're banks. And they literally couldn't even open files that were emailed to them, much less share common design environments. And so the constraints started adding up really fast. And we realized that it wasn't just, that the root of the problem wasn't this handoff moment in time, but that the root of the problem was, where a collaborative part of the business sits in the organization. With the bank, clearly there's a lot of security stuff that they have to be really aware of, but some of the things we started to talk to them about were, how they could get their construction team outside of that space. So we really worked on this. The big thing is that we immediately identified that there was some not only these checklist issues, but that there's a fundamental incentive alignment problem with the way that this process worked. And we offered some really interesting ideas about how to have open bid scenarios. We even talked to some of our subcontractors and other GCs and said, hey, what if at the end of a bid process, everyone sat down at the table and shared all the open information about their process? And as a GC team, the reason that we felt like it was a really powerful solution is because everyone was really thoughtful about that and actually kind of scared to do that. They were scared to sit down and with their competitors at the same table, explain to everyone what their approach and actual scope was. Because what we were really trying to do was to get away from this gotcha style contracting that we do so often, where everyone just excludes everything and plans on running a project entirely through change orders. And so, but the biggest thing that we understood from this work is that we needed to even be more clear. We needed to pull this idea of the checklists and all this stuff out of the process, because it ended up ultimately being really distracting as we presented these solutions. Because it was really about that core idea about aligning those incentives and making sure that all of the contractors at the table were being open and honest about what they actually had in their bids. And that back and forth for so long was why everyone was so kind of closed down and not ready to efficiently and with low friction move the information around. So ultimately we continue to explore ideas about BIM checkers and things that we can ways to sit on the client side, where the information and the scope can be better defined as it comes from the client, but also also continue to try to refine this idea about how to collaboratively with our competitors reveal more information at the table, with the idea that we'll all be better off once these projects happen and we get away from projects that run on and on with change orders. So this has been a great experience to work with our teams on these ideas. We'll continue to have these conversations in the organization and refine that idea of open information revelation and as we begin our projects and end the bid stages.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We so appreciate your participation and sharing. As a reminder to our attendees, you can use the Q&A function of Zoom to throw a question in if you have any questions for Aaron. And I thought I would just kick off while we're waiting for folks to see if they have any other questions. Aaron, I was curious when you said, we normally do this behavior of saying, hey, we're just going to manage everything through change orders. And so if we change this approach, how could that impact? So I was wondering, given that that's probably a norm that's accepted in terms of how projects flow, what do you think some of the consequences are, or in our spirit of systems thinking, what are the other impacts that you might see cascading if you were to change how the projects are moving forward?
Well, so some of it has to do with the amount of detail that's needed at the point. But is essentially what we decided would need to change would be that the client would need to have enough detail to actually start to define scope by these sections. Our teams would need to have tools in their pricing that was more item level, that was more specific to the work. So I think our teams would all need to put a little bit more thought and time into the actual estimation process, and get more granular detail. And ultimately, what ends up happening is these projects would run. It's our theory, and we have some evidence to back up that assumption that projects would run more smoothly, because they wouldn't get broken up by the barrage of RFIs that's associated with those change orders and those scope gaps. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. We are going to move forward. And if there's additional questions for Aaron, please do put them in the Q&A. He's also able to respond to them there. So next up, we're going to move to Lashira Champion-King from Wallbridge. So Lashira, over to you.
All right. Good morning, well, it is morning for everybody. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk a bit about knowledge transfer. This was something, it is somewhat a small extension from what we did last year. We're a second year participant from last year. We talked about doing a SOS app to help people in real time in terms of getting project help and answering questions quickly. This is a little broader in terms of transferring the knowledge as people become unavailable. Now that's the way of the world, if you will. That people can quickly become unavailable, and especially in the construction industry, the market is very hot right now. You can be offered $1 million to go join another company. You can hit the lottery. We've had people, this is not something I'm happy about, but people passed away. And, that there was a need for knowledge based on that as well. We've had people who had to move to another country suddenly. So all types of things that can happen. And so we wanted to extend our ability to be more agile in terms of being able to capture that information before the person moves on. So we started with the how might we, it was just about capturing the organizational knowledge for the team members who become available. We do have a class of 1 million. No, I'm sorry. I happened to see that question. Yes, $1 million. I haven't gotten that offer just yet, but when I do, you'll know about it because you'll see a different company behind my name. However,
I had to ask.
Yes, indeed. And so transferring to another project, that's another piece because there's so much work. And you got to move your superintendent or whoever it is to that next project. That's another piece. So how do we quickly transfer that information and make it available, not just for those that are moving on, because we have a class of retirees, and these are some heavy hitters in the industry. They've been, working, some of them almost 50 years in the industry. They're full of all types of knowledge and things that we wouldn't know about. Those of us that still have a nice ways to go before we hit that part. How do we capture a lot of that information? Next. And so one of the biggest things is lessons learned. We're very huge on lessons learned at Wallbridge of past situations that have happened. I had a success some years ago before this was as hot as it is now. with a retiree who he's another gentleman that had about 50 years. And it took me a series of meetings and interviews and sitting down with him, and I had to look at a billion pictures of his grandchildren. But we got an excellent capture of information, and it worked out so well. All of those processes are drastically improved in terms, and that was out at one of our warehouses. And we're still in touch with that retiree. But we can play golf and such rather than ask him questions about, hey, how did you do this? We were able to do that. So that was one of the bigger successes that we had. One of the quotes from one of the interviews that they talked about, the biggest thing is, the contacts. That's a huge one, and that involves, that's also, even in the project transfer. If someone owes you X number of things for closeout, and this person moves on, and again, like I mentioned, there was an example where a gentleman had to leave the country. What happens to get those things, and if you didn't know about it, and then now you've gotten to the end, and you don't know which manuals you need, and so and who to talk to, and so on and so forth. And so that this was a bigger thing, that a broader thing that was big to a lot of people, was talking about the contacts list. Sorry, next slide. So we talked about, in a hot market, how do we conduct those successful? What does that look like in terms of, if someone becomes unavailable, what should we do? And so that's how it was more the hot market became the issue when I was able to take my sweet little time back in 2017, 2018. Of course, it worked out beautifully, and we were able to improve upon those systems. But this isn't the name of the game. People leave you very suddenly now, just by whatever means. And so how do we do that? And so that was how we were able to kind of reframe that in terms of the question that we were trying to resolve. And so, yeah, through a lot of the interviewing, I talked again about the lessons learned we came up with. We're a can of alphabet soup at Walbridge. We have acronyms for everything. This acronym was called TELL, so Transfer Experience and Legacy Lessons. That's just our thing there. But it was just interesting to listen to those resounding needs, and things that we had to do specifically for owners and customers, and so on and so forth. But those resounding needs, knowing how to pass on, especially systems information, was one thing that was humongous. I have to tell the story about, there was a person who was managing a leak that was inside ceiling tile, and that gentleman became unavailable all of a sudden, and you can guess what happened next. That person who sat at the desk underneath that ceiling tile got a great surprise one day when they came in, and a bucket of water fell down on their head. And so you never know those little things that people are doing. And so those resounding themes kind of got us to a lot of the content that is featured in the TELL checklist. Again, because we had such success with those overtime interviews, when we have opportunities to do that, we definitely take it. I am actually in the middle of one right now with a gentleman, again, 40 years of experience, that we talk through from time to time. And yes, I still am looking at pictures of that gentleman's grandkids in between those sessions. You got to get that out the way first. And then we just go down the list of items and things, successes that he's had over time, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned last year's project, which was SOS. This will be an extension of that, because a lot of these folks are subject matter experts that will have a lot of that real-time information available as subject matter experts, some of the archives of things that these folks were specialized in. So we'll make that available for those of us that remain that need that information. And then just some of the reflections. I worked alone, so there was no one to manage my analysis paralysis. But this was a pretty good system set up here with going through a lot of the processes, so I was able to get out of my own way. And yeah, that is the gist of what's happening. But I am in the middle of one of these, and I'm hearing some very good stories, to say the least.
Great. Thank you so much. Lashira, I'm going to hand it over to Vivek to ask a question to you.
Sure.
Great. So thank you, Lashira, for this presentation, and delighted to see you referencing your work in last year's Innovation Lab. I did want to bump, Kathleen Lasman had left a comment in the Q&A, which I'm going to transform a little bit into a question, which was,
Sure.
so Kathleen writes, it's a great idea to involve facility management team. And I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on that, Lashira, what your thoughts are on engaging those parts of the organization into this kind of effort, and if that, came up at all in your investigation, or where you'd like to take this tool looking ahead.
Could you repeat the question again? Did you say involving the facilities management team?
That's right.
If you don't know me, my degree is actually in facilities I have an undergrad degree in facilities management. And so that is one of the huge ones. So one of the models, they actually refer to it. I'm sorry for people who aren't as young as me. They call it DBOM. So for Walbridge, as a company, design, build, manage and operate, and then of course maintain. And so with all those elements into the piece, on your design piece, your day to day, I think the gentleman before me mentioned, yeah, just manage everything by change orders. How do you flip that on that end of it so that it's not just that, because we know that that's not gonna that generally doesn't work out. It's a lot more painful than you'd like it to be. But then as you get over on the facility side, and I think he also talked about that, how do I hand that information off to those owners? How do we know, are those as-built what we say they are? And how do we manage that? And I can tell you all types of stories about that end of things, but we don't have enough time for that. But I've had to manage with that background in facilities management. They utilized me very early on in my career to do some very painful exercises to rectify that type of information. So hopefully that answered your question. I'm sorry.
No, fantastic. Love that, Lashira. And you're absolutely, that's one domain where there's a lot of knowledge that's often not written down, right? Exactly as you're pointing to. So I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
I just have to comment that that's the best acronym I've ever heard of. DBOM.
DBOM.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lashira. Really fantastic work, and loved hearing the stories about your project. We are going to move forward now. I'm very excited to welcome Mary from the Bolt Company. And so, Mary, over to you.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Mary Celestin, and as mentioned, I'm with the Bolt Company. I'm a project engineer, and I also do production management work. And my background is kind of lean construction and systems engineering. So that's a little bit about me, and we can jump into the next slide. So the title slide is What's the Issue? And as I go through this presentation, you'll see why that's the title slide. But to start, I wanted to set the stage a little bit about my team. So my project is in Oakland. It's a healthcare project. It's a 5-story cancer center, pretty large project, $250 to $300 million. We're an IPD project, so we're an integrated project delivery. We're very focused on being collaborative. It's a Sutter joint venture with Stanford, but really a Sutter project. So for those who are familiar with working with Sutter, we use vPlanner, which is a very specific tool for production tracking and management. And Sutter has some very key values. They really care about production, transparency, predictive flow, and a lean culture, a collaborative environment. Those are some of the values that Sutter has. Those are some of the things that, as I moved through this process for an innovation around my project team, that were front of mind. And then additionally, we have some constraints within Bolt. So Bolt is a national company. We have branches all throughout the country, but we also operate very independently within each of our operating groups. So Western Operations, California's group. That said, there is a One Bolt mission, and I'm involved in that corporate initiative to create some sense of standardization throughout the company, so that if you are, whether you're a client who's moving from Kansas to California, you have a overall sense of the type of quality and the type of experience you'll have working with Bolt, but then same as an employee. So if I were to move to the Wisconsin branch, I'd have that same level of expectation of what my job is going to look like. So that's some of the larger landscape within which this project took place. And to get a little bit of sense of how collaborative our team was, that picture was us on Halloween doing a costume contest together. So moving into the next slide, the starting point for me was I came onto this project midsummer, so around the same time that this Innovation Lab started, about a month or two before the Innovation Lab started. And we'd been in pre-construction design for over a year, having a lot of issues with the city getting permitted. And we were bringing in a lot of new team members as we were getting ready for construction. So not only did we have new team members to the project, like myself, but we also had a lot of new team members to Bolt. So about like half of our PMs are just new to Bolt and don't know any of these processes or what to expect. People were moving in and out. So I came into the superstructure scope with a PM who is new to Bolt and the project. And we had to try to scramble to get all of the information from the previous PM who didn't leave a very great paper trail for us to know what was going on. And one thing that I started to notice talking to the PMs was across the different phases and across the different groups, there were still these silos, even though we were in this IPD collaborative environment. And this is one of the main issues I started hearing when I started asking team members, what's something you would like improved about our team? And so the big one that I noticed was construction phase. So we'd have our own cluster group meetings throughout the week where you'd have the excavation and shoring team and they'd meet, and then the superstructure team and they'd meet. And sometimes you'd have the same issue brought up in one group, but there wasn't a clear way for that to be communicated outside of our weekly big room, which was mainly talking about high level big updates, not some of these minor small updates that were more pertinent for different team members to know. So if I'm the architect and I'm going into every single one of these meetings, I'm getting the same information and it's being tracked 10 different times in 10 different meeting minutes, I started seeing that there was a lot of over processing waste and how we were organized as a team. So we can move on to the next slide, but that was really our starting point. For me, the question was, how can we build that transparency to eliminate those silos and reduce over processing? So the starting structure here, I had this group meeting with the project team where we started talking about like what qualifies like key information we want to know. So on the left, you see these notes I took on this whiteboard while we were all talking about what's the key information you're trying to get in discussions with the cluster groups. So what are like short-term issues, long-term issues? And then on the right, you have like a formal process that I'd created for the group around processing RFIs. And we'd started having a conversation. This is our RFI process. And it similarly devolved into what qualifies as an issue, and the team trying to figure out how are we processing these different problems that come up. So what started as a conversation, I think we can move to the next slide. What started as a conversation around issue like transparency and removing these silos really turned into a conversation about tracking issues and like what are the different kind of issues throughout the project phase. And so before reimagining my how might we question, I created some stakeholder personas with one of my UX colleagues on my team. So we had one for the architect, the subcontractor, and the GC. So we had a description, a bio for them, their personality. There's some more information not on this slide that we created, but really trying to understand with more one-on-one interviews with these different stakeholders, what is it that they want to see to remove silos? Like, what is it that they care about before we can start to design a product around it? So we can move to the next slide. And so the revised understanding was, how might we remove silos to eliminate overprocessing when processing issues? Like that was the focus. It wasn't just, oh, we're having these discussions. It was whenever we have, this is a problem, or this is a design change, or this is a question, like how do we track that information across each stage of the project? And on this larger topic, how do we create like a roadmap throughout the construction process so different teams have a starting point of this is what you should end up with, even if you end up using a different tool or a different technology. And that's me coming from that one Bolt lens. So we had a lot of questions like, what's the issue? What are the pressing issues right now? So this research mainly focused on design inquiries pre-construction. So before we got permitted, they're not qualifying as even a non-material change because we're not permitted by the city. So, but we still want to track those issues. So when I came onto the project, there's around 135 issues with our structural steel sub that have been coordinated with our engineer of record on the structural engineer of record that we had no record of as the GC. They'd been informally communicated. And me and my team ended up retroactively throughout this process going through and updating all 135 of these issues. And we're in the process of verifying all of them have been updated to the drawings before updating this permitted set. So that was some of the work we were doing to see the kind of issues that were pressing. We can move on to the next slide. So with the current understanding and some of these experiments I've mentioned, I know I could talk forever, but we're close on time. So some of that documentation, design inquiries. So right now we're using Smartsheet, and you can see that on the right slide where we have like the item number, the sub, and it's really just like the same process that you would have for like a formal RFI and like a Procore or a project inertia, but just actually coming to the same page that we should all be documenting questions that get sent over, whether they're brought up in a cluster group meeting or in an email in this one centralized location. And I have a separate folder where we upload any of the SKs associated to it. That was like a pretty big game changer for our group, even though it's not something radical or game changing. The architects were really able to keep track of the inquiries that they had. They weren't just getting lost in their emails because everyone's just like, oh, these are informal inquiries. It doesn't really matter, but it does. This is all these things we're trying to make before we submit our submittals and get everything up to par. And then in construction, we've been talking about our field issues, design inquiries, and additional RFIs, and understanding these different meetings that we have. So cluster groups, daily huddles, big rooms, and linking any conversations that happen through the week and understanding when should they be brought into these different meetings. So a lot of the brainstorming was around, if you have a one-on-one conversation in this collaborative environment where we're super informal, which of these meetings should it be brought into, and how can we make sure that it's transparent? So we have a separate sheet where across cluster groups, we track action items and issues that come up. And so you can see once a week, the PMs now have their meeting and they bring up this sheet. We all bring up the cluster group sheet, and we see if there's any duplicates. We see if there's any over-processing happening, and we've created this process to make sure that we're all on the same page of what these issues look like. We can move on to the next slide. I have like 30 seconds left. So what's the flow? This is something that we're working on right now, is understanding like throughout the entire process of construction, what kind of issues come up. And so that's going to get into the future state, but you can kind of see this Figma flow chart and this process from design to closeout. Next slide. And so my lessons learned, innovation balancing act. So both for myself with juggling a lot on the project, but also with teammates, having a lot of interest at the start in the summer, but now that we're permitted and in construction, keeping up that momentum for people to have these conversations and take that hour of their week to talk about this and start brainstorming and ideating. That's been something that's been a challenge, and figuring out how to create that buy-in, being this is important. Tools, so I really think in the lessons, the systems mapping and the storyboarding are the tools that I'm going to really keep a hold of and keep using for this next step, which is ideally I want to create this baseline for future Bolt projects where we have throughout that process designed to close out. These are the type of issues that come up, and these are the potential ways in which you can create transparency from the start. So you're not retroactively processing 135 design inquiries over the past year. And so I know that these things all exist and we all have our own ways of doing them, but how can you make sure that a team right at that design phase, right when they get the contract, are setting themselves up for success, whether they're in an IPD environment or not, although our designs are focused on that collaborative space and those goals and those values. So it's been really, really fun, really exciting. And I've had a great time working with some of my colleagues. So like Daniel Begay, he's a PM for the interiors and enclosure. He has a UX background. He was really supportive. His Figma designs there. So he was my main collaborative partner on this project. And that's my presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mary, for that. And love how you used such a diversity of tools from the experience to move this forward. I wanted to relay a question from Steve Burrows in the audience. So Steve asks, how do you determine what people do not need to know so that you can reduce information overload?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially me as someone who likes all of the information and types the super duper long email that everyone's like, thanks, Mary, I didn't need that. I'm that person. So for the cluster group sheet alone, we've gone through at least 5 iterations where if you saw on that very first slide, we had like 30 things that we thought people would want to know about an issue or an action item. And when we started, everyone really said we wanted to see this all on one page. We don't want to be moving onto multiple pages if you print this into a PDF. And it became, we want to know the issue itself, the category, like what topic is it under? Is it associated with one of these design inquiries that we're tracking, so we can go and learn more information about it over there if we want to? Who's it assigned to? Who's asking for it? And when do they want it by? Like that's what we want to know. And then there's additional information like, does it need to be updated in the contract documents? Is it a vPlanner task? Is it modeled in the BIM? Like what level and floors does it impact? Like, is there a cost impact associated to this? Like there's all of those questions, but those are all the subsequent that you can only answer once you've taken a look at those first 5. But it really took taking it out and using it in cluster group meetings and trying to print it out and send it out in emails and getting some feedback from the team to see that those were the 5 main questions that people cared about to start. And then you can always have that information further down on the Excel. Like these are things you can look at if you want to. So that's my answer. Definitely more thoughts there.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Mary, for that. And yeah, really like that discovery process behind that response. Some great comments from Kathleen and Peter in the Q&A. So Mary, I encourage you to answer those while we're moving on, but I'll hand it back over to Rachel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mary. And next, I'm so excited to welcome both Corey and Neil from Mortensen. Over to you.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, coming through. Great.
Awesome. All right, so we'll tag team the content here. So I might get a little clunky, but essentially both of us are in some type of sustainable operations function. And the big question is, why are you here? And you can go to the next slide. And so we started off with 2 different questions, and we essentially looked at it in 2 different work streams. So my role is across the entire organization, and Corey specifically in wind. And my initial how might we was increase team member sustainability, innovation, and storytelling across the company, looking specifically at what is the overall issue. And then Corey, I'll turn it over to you to hit the next couple of bullet points.
Yeah, so my how might we was the first bullet point there of improving the experience of our team members, specifically in Mortensen's wind group. So those really tied together. But there was an example of we in wind piloted a partnership with an equipment supplier. And the pilot did actually give us some valuable information. There were challenges along the way, of course, but when we tried to present what we did learn, we had data to back up to other projects so they could take advantage of those lessons learned. There was some instant shutdown, even though we could say, like, look, here it is. This is what we did. So you can see that list on the bottom right of some comments that we'd get that's different. I don't want to hear about it. Nope, way too risky. Even showing the data, or frequently talking about sustainability. You can go away, hippie. I don't need your ideas. So lots of those kinds of themes as we just started the conversations.
So how did your understanding the problem evolve? This was something that I think we bounced between each other a lot. And I'm gonna ultimately, when we get to the next slide, start to realize, we're in sustainability, we potentially, or the stigma may be asking people to do just one more thing. And there definitely is some of that, right? We're already asking our team members to do a lot on site, and then adding another item to think about. Corey she showed her interview results there. I'm actually headed out to the West Coast to do some more interviewing of projects where we have a couple of initiatives going on next week. So this will be great to use this framework, but I think it was right, simple and digestible, not layering another thing on the team members' plates. Starting to hone in on our communication and what that looks like across the company, and then right, we're change agents, so this isn't necessarily going to be easy, and we'll have to be pace ourselves for what we can expect to be done and changed. And Corey's had that great quote, changing hearts and minds, right? Corey, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about your interview process.
Sure. I just had it in my head that I know at least two other presenters today have brought up things that I experienced. But I think it was our very first speaker today talking about how relationships are gonna or what drive change. And so that was a big part of this. I have been in the WIN group for 7 years and known a lot of our team members, but I did a tour of 7 projects down in Texas where I have never worked, and we do silo our teams a little bit. So some of those folks I'd never worked with. And so just keeping really keeping the interview process of like open-ended. I'm just talking with somebody. I want to understand more about you, your day. How are things going here? Helped to build those connections, and then allowed us to, even if not every conversation I got to even ask one question in the direction of sustainability, I built the start of the relationships and have been able to leverage those since then. And then just trying to find ways of, okay, what did I learn from this interview? How do I bake that into what I'm trying to accomplish now? Not trying to do the opposite and bake what I'm trying to accomplish into their lives. So the other thing that I think Mary just brought up was early on in project phases, we shifted some of our practices with project mobilization and started talking about sustainability earlier on. And we'd have a lot of buy-in then. And then as soon as the work got rolling, right, people just kind of lost that time. So trying to figure out how else do we keep people engaged. So on the left-hand bullets there, communication, keeping people engaged with terms that resonate better with them than sustainability might. So taking away out of the interview process still what does resonate with each of these different groups of people most? Is it safety? Is it consistency? Is it accountability? What is it that we're going to be able to relate to sustainability that's already top of mind for these folks?
So we took a look at all this information, and we essentially started to combine our 2 questions into one. How might we integrate sustainable operations into standard business practices? As we started thinking about, like, we thought about this as a word cloud of like, these are things like sustainability, the word sustainability, what we potentially could be perceived as doing is it's a customer problem, right? It's you're a tree hugger, it's a political issue, it could be time consuming, it's expensive, all these different things. How do we turn that into looking into this is a wellness opportunity for our team members, right? Some of our core values, looking more at lean, what are we putting into our projects, contract type, that type of deal. And it's all got to be authentic. So looking at these things as not just somebody saying something and not following through. So that's how we started to reframe our problem. And it was great to have that little module to bounce that whole idea of how we look differently at the problem on. You can go to the next one. So aligning with our core values in lieu of talking about sustainability in particular, starting to align with those core values and how that plugs into what we're doing. My in particular thing was looking at how we're building, not what we're building, right? We do a lot of sustainable buildings, a lot of renewable energy infrastructure, and now starting to look more at how we're building and the people that are looking at planning on how we're building, what do our site logistics look like, et cetera. Again, that very clear communication was one of them to look forward to the future. We also started to think about we need top-down support as opposed to and bottom-up framework, right? We have a set of corporate goals, and then we also have to have the goals within our specific operating groups across our country, and in various regions across the country could look a lot different, and various operating groups could look a lot different than others. And then this is again that long haul pull, versus a short-term push, right? You can't push a rope up a hill. And we can make progress even if we don't have a current benchmark yet. Any other thoughts there, Corey?
No, nothing to add on that. Sorry.
So for us looking at what activities you can pursue next to continue building on our work. So I put together my role within the company was new within the last 9 months. And I was a design phase manager and a project manager for a little while in the field, specifically MEP, and Corey is a superintendent by background. So starting to reframe these things, communication, again, focusing on that. What does it look like at a corporate level? And then developing resources to help teams implement that stuff across the entire organization. And for me, I'm going to have to be a little more focused, if you will. How do I help support Wind, and Corey's leading that, obviously, and how do I help support some other operating groups in particular? So I think some of our challenges could look like, scope creep, how to, find other objects, shiny objects to go chase after when we need to get back on our overall corporate mission, for me particularly. And then, carbon is going to be a big one for me this next year with California passing regulation, carbon accounting regulation. So how do I implement that across the company? And that has to be a guiding light as opposed to some other cool things that definitely are important, but may not be top of mind. And then how do we share across the entire company? I think the biggest thing for me on this one, sorry, Corey, I'm talking a little bit long here. It was a challenge, was just making time I got behind in the overall framework of the program and making time to use the tools, but having a tool to put a process that I was going through was great. And I'll definitely continue to use them over the course of the next year.
So I have a question for you both, and thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. So I loved your insight around language, right? And how at times you could be talking about the same thing, but you get someone to engage if you're talking about in terms of safety instead of sustainability. And so I was curious if you could share one experiment you've run. Have either of you tried using that in your engagements, and how to go?
I don't think I have a very specific example, but I've definitely used it just in general in trying to get a really good read right away. Who am I talking to, and how do they kind of feel about the topic, and just right away changing my approach. If it's somebody that's clearly leaning into sustainability, we'll get really excited together, and that's cool. If it's somebody that's not, I'll just really try to hone in first off of what are they trying to accomplish, and just not even bring up anything that might be a buzzword. Because we don't have to, right? Align it, the whole concept of aligning it with our core principles already. What we found a lot too, I think, is sustainability is really just building on every other practice we already have. It's like, yes, do the required stuff, the compliance stuff, the zero injury, that's not getting anybody hurt, and what else? So it's really just building on what we already do. And so it's a little bit frustrating in my head right away, but it's not that difficult necessarily to just speak the language that somebody else is going to resonate with.
And it's a great practice of embracing that human-centered design, be human-centered in who you're talking to. Well, thank you both so much for sharing. I'm going to move us forward here, but really appreciate you sharing of your insights. So next, we're going to go to Sergio and Johanna from Herrero Builders. So over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I just kind of want to kick it off. Sergio and I are actually in the same room, and we're sharing audio. So I realize now, though, that you won't be able to see him. So I'll kind of tilt my camera over when he starts to speak. But yeah, so our presentation today will cover a journey to discovering what we needed at Herrero was really to establish a stronger culture of innovation and sort of establish some behaviors before we could, jump and leap and get to where we really wanted to go. Next slide, please. So I'm a senior project engineer at Herrero Builders, and Sergio's a project manager, and both of us are part of Herrero's innovation group. And we participated in this lab as part of the group's goal to put forth more educational opportunities centered around innovation. We were both very interested in focusing a problem that would help the innovation group, and for us to kind of take the tools that we learned here and bring it back to the group to see how we could implement them. However, leadership made a request of us in the beginning that kind of shifted our focus, which Sergio is going to talk about.
Yeah, so as Joanna kind of talked about, next slide, please. So really, we've been in the part of the innovation group for a couple of years, and a lot of our initiatives hadn't catch on to the entire company. And with the requirement of the upper leadership of kind of doing something for the whole company, we started our framework, or our how might we question on how might we overcome Hero's lack of data collection and knowledge sharing, transitioning from project to project. We kept it open because we knew that we wanted to tackle multiple areas in the company. So we ran with this statement, knowing that it could transform into something else. Next slide, please.
We really thought our initial problem statement was great. However, as we kind of got into it, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, it actually proved to be just way too vague, right? And it lacked specific direction. And so we kind of just, still ran with it. Our first frame and reframing of our problem, we actually leveraged our innovation group so that they could help us, go through some of the exercises together. We actually did one, which was the fishbone exercise. And while it was great to do with the group, the word data in our how might we statement was just way too broad of a word. Not only did everyone have different perspectives of what data meant to them, and also similarly with lessons learned, which is something that kind of kept coming up as we did the fishbone exercise, that also kind of proved to be just as vague. So, I think there's also, we all kind of want to problem solve what we do on a day-to-day basis too. So that was something that kind of came up as well. And I kind of thinking back on it too, at the time, Herrera was going through a reorganization of leadership. And then we were also looking at if our processes were working at, how they were working at the company. So we also don't really know if when we were running with this exercise, if that affected the group's frame of mind. And it could also have been why our focuses were so scattered, with just, or I may be triggering with the word data and lessons learned as they kind of came up. So after the exercise, Sergio and I met, and really we decided that what we really needed to do was focus on what was obtainable for us and something that we were able to, have the most influence in. So we did shift back to lessons learned, but more specifically on how the innovation more specifically on innovation lessons learned that were being captured at the project levels. That's something that we were, focusing on, and we thought we would just go out and reach out to the project teams to see how innovations are being captured. So at that point, we reframed our how might we statement to how might we collect innovations learned and standardize them across projects. Next slide, please.
So with that, we took our questions and put about a dozen or so questions, and really took a time to select about 10 different members across different departments. And this was really a great exercise for myself, just kind of from my perspective versus my coworkers' perspectives. What we discovered, really the top three things is, one, is we were lacking the culture of innovation from the team. It wasn't just that we were wanting to capture this data and information, is that the team should and want to have this so we can record keep from project to project. And really, we didn't have an established process for capturing any of this. So teams were just either doing it verbally or not doing it at all. And then the biggest thing is that there was no requirement from any upper management, and definitely because we have different projects and different owners, there's different baselines at each one of those. And the third one was the departments that we have, being finance, being operations, they have different information that they capture in different processes, and those communications don't coordinate all the time. So that data isn't valuable to a finance manager the way that it is for operations manager. Next slide. So with this, we reframed our statement, and we focus more on how can we change the culture of innovation, and this will change kind of the way we approach it. And then one thing that we did as an experiment with the innovation team is that we asked everyone to do a roundtable of just, little things that they do day to day that might, for them, just make their day better, faster. And really, this just promoted that innovation mindset and really taught us that there is no such thing as such a small innovation that's too small. And really, we were able to talk to a lot of people in different departments and learn a lot of their little processes that actually we can influence and actually help guide. Next slide, please.
So looking forward, for sure, the work around establishing a stronger culture of innovation, for sure is just, at the beginning, it's nowhere near done for us. And so we want to continue to frame and reframe our problem to discover other areas of deficit and really how we can change the behavior of people, just to, so it becomes second nature to them to want to capture lessons learned, whether it's just a innovation lesson learned or a general project lesson learned. Our ultimate goal definitely is to create a standard process around the lessons learned. I'm sorry, actually, sorry. No, I am in the right spot, sorry. So yeah, we want to create a standard process around the lessons learned with clear expectations and guidelines. And again, a process that feels like it's second nature to people. We also want to keep using our small innovations exercise that Sergio just spoke about. We definitely see the value in it. I believe it's infectious to see someone really, really like nerd out on something that they're enjoying, no matter how small it is, but that it's really helped them to achieve something really big. Plus, we realize that that what really ends up happening is people document without realizing that they're document because they're so focused on being excited and teaching something rather than like the document process that sometimes can feel kind of forced and as an afterthought. We really liked the small innovations, which by the way, it's a working title. So if you guys have suggestions, definitely shoot it our way. But we want to continue to PDCA this process as we want to implement it company-wide and use it as a template for other projects that the innovation kind of puts forth. Next slide, please. So reflections on design innovation tools. When Sergio and I reflected on the lab, as you might have picked up on, the tool that really stood out for us was framing and reframing our problem and revisiting our how might we statements. We definitely want to bring this back to the innovation group whenever we put forth any initiatives. All of us kind of want to jump in and get to solving something. It's, I think, what really attracted us to be a part of the group. But really, we need to understand if the problem that we're trying to solve is the main problem or if it's really an underlying issue of something else. And we think reframing and framing that can help us just achieve and centralize our thoughts a lot better.
So our journey has changed from where we started to where we're at now. And I think that's due to the tools that CFI has presented to us. So I really appreciate having those tools to be able to grab an idea, a thought, and just run it through those experiments to make sure that we're not just only attacking a problem, but also the overall issue and addressing all the customers. And then really the management reorganization of our company is actually going to help us go from a top-down decision to more of a roundtable decision. So some of these initiatives can go across multiple projects. So yeah, I want to thank Joanna, thank CFI for all the support these past couple months, and any questions from the team we'll take now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joanna and Sergio. Really interesting work, and love how you really embrace reframing. That was clearly evident from your work. I wanted to relay a question from Kathleen Lasman in the audience. So Kathleen asks, do you folks see the building industry embracing data technology more or less? Embracing data technology would and should need to include training. So Joanna and Sergio, would love to hear your thoughts on that question from Kathleen.
Yeah, we absolutely need to continue. We are trying to, like I said, the people have had years of knowledge in construction, but it gets lost when people retire, and there's no data tracking of that. So I think being part of this kind of makes you think like, hey, had I talked to this guy? And I kind of heard that theme with the other presentations today. Of how we want to capture that. And so we don't really have an established process in the construction industry, and I think we could benefit from it. It feels like all the other companies are at the same level. And once we have this information, that will just be our baseline to really bring in new technologies. If we were to just bring in technology right now, it wouldn't be usable as we're experiencing right now. We can't use AI just because we don't have a database to start from. So Hope that answers that question.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Sergio. And I'll hand it back over to Rachel.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. We are going to move forward to our last but certainly not least presentation, which is from April Willoughby, who is an independent marketing and communications consultant. So April, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Again, I'm April Willoughby, and I have had the privilege of working as a consultant with the Center for Innovation, doing their marketing and communications. So, and with that, obviously I have a very different topic that I focused on for the Innovation Lab than everyone else here. And I just felt really lucky to have been in the course and kind of in this group, and been able to see and hear all of the different issues everyone else has been working on. And obviously just because I've been in such a different focus than everyone else. But you can move on to the next slide. A little bit about my background, and I know we're running over, so I'll try my best to keep this quick. But I've been in-house most of my career, about 14 years in-house at a couple of different general contractors, and always doing marketing, always definitely focused on proposal work, proposal management. So when I heard that we were, to come up with a problem statement, my mind definitely just went straight to the proposal process. I've experienced proposals that were, we had probably 24 hours to put together. And then also proposals that we had a full 3 months and a team of 30 people working on a design build proposal, and, it won. So I've been through the gamut of, best case scenario and worst case scenario. And really, the 80-20 rule, I think, applies here. A majority of the proposals are last minute, and it's for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's a late or last minute go decision. And, I know that a lot of the last minute issues come because everyone working on proposals has other jobs. The narratives that people are responsible for are, not their first job. It's running projects, which you guys have all talked about here. But the implications of that, or the kind of the consequences of that, in my experience and from talking to people and interviewing people, is it really comes down on the proposal manager, the marketing person, and they kind of have to deal with that, submitting a proposal last minute. Again, there's been, there's stories of, and me myself, I've had stories of, staying to the office until midnight and then being there at 5 a.m., still putting content into the proposal, and, sweaty palms, like trying to get that thing in. You just think the whole time, all these people's time and all these people's effort has gone into this, and it's really just down to the last 2 minutes here of what I can do. So, it's just stressful. And just in my capacity now, as a consultant, I have a different perspective, and then also kind of a greater incentive to do these much more efficiently and bring more value to my clients. So that's really why I wanted to focus on this and dive in. Some of the other, through my interviews and through some of the research that I did, and looking at kind of the consequences here, is that people experience burnout. A lot of the marketing people switch companies, or, leave the industry altogether. I've had multiple friends do this. And then now we need to really start thinking about retention and recruiting because of that. And, looking and talking with younger people more in the millennial age or the Generation Z, these people really value collaboration a lot more than maybe the older generations. And this is completely a generalization. So it's something to consider. And that was really something that stood out in my research going through this process, is that, we're being assigned work, and typically, one proposal will go to one proposal manager. But with my research and kind of what I realized going through this is looking at the problem from a more holistic point of view, or maybe a more 30,000-foot level. And so that's how I kind of came up with some ideas that I'm, beta testing. And I will admit, I haven't completely finished this entire course, but these are kind of the things that I'm running with to help this proposal process be more efficient, but also give the proposal manager the support that they really need to not feel that burnout and to avoid it. And so some of these are, ahead of the proposal, during the proposal, and then after. But these are some solutions that I've come up with. They're pretty self-explanatory. Skills training, I think, is a huge thing. And I don't think that it's, as in my experience and from the people I've talked to, really given the priority that it really should. There's SMPS, is the marketing association for the AEC industry. They put on boot camps. Every single chapter has one. And I've been to them. They're very good. And these are, of course, for newer, more green marketing coordinators. But there's a new AEC Marketing Academy that is also, it'll give you a certificate, and it'll kind of put you in a place where you can then go and take on assignments. So really, bolstering your team and their skills. One thing that I learned in talking to people is, salary, but with maybe overtime. We all agree to a rate of 40 hours per week, but when you're doing, double or triple that, that can be really nice, and just show acknowledgement and appreciation for the extra time you're putting in. Wellness is another thing. I came across a company and an idea where they give you a wellness day bank, and that's separate from sick days or holidays or PTO. And that really just helps with, taking the time you need to get back into your normal self, so you can be there and be your best self at work. And then resources and tools. And this is things like utilizing AI and all of these other tools and resources. But I think the most important thing here that I really want to talk about is the team. And I know I kind of have it here as a list of 5 different groups, but there's 3 different marketing type people here that I think is really helpful in putting together proposals. And that is a proposal manager that kind of runs the show and is kind of the project manager. But then having a resource, someone, a graphic designer, and then a copywriter. I think in my experience, having these types of people on the team are extremely helpful. And I think having those people on the team also talks to the collaborative nature of younger generations. So I think that's really the key piece here. In addition to the standard important, must-have people, which are the project executive, the business development, and the project team. But that's kind of the way I came up with this. Someday when I'm running a marketing department, it's going to look something like this. But again, I'm still kind of floating this to people and having those conversations and seeing how viable all of this really is.
Great. All right. If that's it, April, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And I think on that idea of the team, Kathleen has a question about the owner. And so I'll just relay this for you. How can owners make the proposal process more streamlined and less onerous? And I think you touched on this in a couple different ways in your presentation, but would love to hear you tie that together for Kathleen's question. April, over to you.
Yeah, that is such a key, kind of key $1 million question. I think a lot of owners are asking that, and I've had conversations with many different clients, and they, it is something that everyone is thinking about. And I think just trying to get an outside perspective on your RFP, and make sure that the questions you're asking are really going to give you the answers that you need and want. Some questions can just be confusing, and then some branch back into public works where you're answering to like shareholders or public money, and so they have to be written a certain way. And some RFPs I think just stem from that, and there's these iterations that keep questions, and they don't kind of iterate them or update to kind of just take a look at what you can remove or what you can rephrase and how you can simplify. How you do that, like I said, I think an outsider's perspective or someone internal just really taking a scrutinous eye to it is one thing, but yeah, it's not easy. I understand.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, April. And I'll turn it back over to Rachel here.
Thanks so much, April. And thank you so much to all of our presenters today. Vivek and I have enjoyed learning alongside you. We are core believers that innovation is a learning process. I loved hearing how people dabbled on so many different parts of the tools that we presented throughout the lab. And I also love hearing the passion that comes through from all of the presenters, because at the end of the day, that's why we say innovation is a learning process. You got to have passion and interest to go forward and make change happen on the projects that you're working on. So, and the other thing I want to mention is that for us, framing and reframing is the heart of the innovation process. I always think it's a superpower, especially in this day and age of complex problems. The more you can stand and see around different aspects of the problem, that gives you a lot more agency and choice in the directions that you go, the resources that you allocate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margie to give a few closing comments.
Thanks, Rachel. I have to tell you, this is like one of my favorite moments is spending time with Rachel and Vivek, who are so amazing as leaders, mentors, coaches for so many people, and all of you who are so committed to your work that you took the time to participate in the Innovation Lab, as well as come up with these just amazing solutions, which are in most cases springboards to new challenges. So I can't thank you enough for your time and your energy today. I'm really pleased to announce the Center for Innovation will be doing the Innovation Lab again. You can look for details in the spring so you can continue to work on the amazing projects you described today. Or maybe you can talk with some of your colleagues about engaging in a new challenge. So thank you so much for your time. Dean, were you going to say a word or two?
First, congratulations to everyone who presented. I was so amazed at what you have done in a very short time. And here's my advice. Continue, become a master of the innovation learning process. It's going to take a lot more work and practice to do that. So make that your practice. And I really truly believe, based on my own experience, that this practice that you put in to become this master will be the very best thing you can do to improve your company's delivery of value to your customers. And lastly, let your bosses know that they need to send more people through the iLab, because you can't do this all by yourself. That was clear. So you need partners, and so keep coming to the Innovation Lab. Thanks.
Thanks, Dean. And we'll conclude now. Rachel and Vivek, thank you so much. We'll be looking forward to another great series of presentations soon. Thank you so much for everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.